I often ask myself, was it worth it to spend the rest of your life in a prison cell? I've wanted to tell this story for years, but I didn't exactly know how. Now, however, after being here for at least 15 years, and having next to no sanity left, and next to no soul, I can tell my story. Because I know that I'll die in here like every other piece of shit that came before me. I grew up in a well-to-do Christian home. My grandparents went to church every Sunday. They were good people. Where could I have gone wrong? My grandmother used to tell me, son, if you get right with the Lord now, you'll never stray. Okay. I think we ask ourselves when we hear someone else's story, how can somebody go from being so good to so bad? How can somebody go from being so righteous to so fucked up? I'm not a man of big words. I'm not a philosopher. All I can tell you is my story, and I can only tell it to you in the words that I know how. I'm not smart. I dropped out of high school when I was in 10th grade. Yeah, real remarkable I was. Hardly ever intended. When I was 12 years old, that's when all the trouble started. I was walking home from school one day, and a black limo pulled up alongside me on the sidewalk. "Hey, kid!" The man leaned out the window. He had a goatee and an almost perfectly round, bald head. Looked kind of alien to me. "You want a ride? I'd like to talk to you about something." Well, me being the kind of kid, the kind of rebel who stole cigarettes at 2 in the morning and had my 10th gas station robbery, I wasn't afraid. I said sure and got into the back seat of the car, and we drove down a dark alleyway. He told me all about life on the streets. "You think you know it all, kid, huh?" he said. "Well, I've had my fair share of run-ins," I stammered, not exactly knowing what the man wanted, but knowing that if I could prove what a badass I was, I might have a chance to be cool with this guy. "Well, kid," the man said, "have you always wanted money? Have you always wanted to be famous?" "Oh, yes," I said. "Absolutely. There's nothing I want more in my life." The man smiled, looked more like a leer, and leaned toward me, his eyes looking somewhat alien in the streetlight. "Kid, I've got a deal for you," he said. He opened a laptop and clicked on a few web pages. "I want you to meet a friend of mine." I was kind of confused, but I decided, hey, if it got my foot in the door, I was going to do it. "He calls himself the devil," the man said. Myself coming from a Christian home, despite the badass little pre-gangster that I was, my heart filled with fear. We were taught that the devil was the father of lies, that you shouldn't trust him, the personification of evil. "Kid," the man said, noticing my freaked out expression, You want money, you want sex, you want drugs. This is what you gotta do, the man said. And then, I kid you not, he seemed to melt into the screen of the fucking laptop. One minute he was in the driver's seat, and the next minute he was staring at me through the monitor. His eyes a bright orange.
I can make you a promise, kid,
he said.
I can make you as rich as possible. You just need to trust in me.
Well, me being a fool and young, I said okay. And just like that, in the snap of a finger, the streetlights returned, and the man sat there looking at me in the front seat. You ready for this, kid? He said, turning around and offering me what I'm sure he thought was a pleasant smile. But I could see the devil in his eyes. Yes, I said. Over the next 5 or so years, I murdered, I stole, I robbed wherever I could. I lived my dream. I worked my way all the way up to crime boss, the head man. I made a lot of enemies along the way, too. But that didn't matter. I had the devil on my side. I was safe. Well, I thought, anyway. I sat there in my office one morning, casually strumming on my little ukulele that I had behind the desk. Lame, I know. And glancing periodically over at my laptop screen, downloading the next pages of crimes and maps that I was going to carry out that day. When suddenly my office door opened. And it was a man that I hadn't seen in about 4.5 years. I had murdered his whole family. And I'd had him sent to prison for the crime. The man had a lot of money, so he could fight the charges. But I had put away an innocent man. Let me tell you something, motherfucker, he said, staring at me behind the desk, eyes filled with rage. My heart hammered. I just knew, in the back of my mind, of all the experiences that I had had over the years, I knew that one day I was going to get mine. I was a fool for trusting the devil. I knew it. I knew that one day... The man pulled out a pistol and stood facing me on the opposite side of my large oak desk. The only thing separating he from myself was a fucking pile of paperwork. The man shoved it to the floor and pointed the pistol right in my face. You destroyed my whole life, he said. You ruined everything for me. I sat there. I only had seconds to think about what to do. I reached down behind the desk and I grabbed my gun and he fired. And I fired. The next thing I knew, I was on my feet, behind the desk. The man's brains splattered all over the monitor. The projectile screen in front of my desk where I watched all my shit going on my cameras. I stood there in silence as the voice of my grandmother echoed through my head. Boy, trust in the Lord, and you'll go down the right path. Trust in the devil, and you'll be doomed. I knew I was doomed. I had committed my last crime. Before I knew it, the cops were there. They raided everything. They took everything. My entire empire went down in one night. I've sat here in my cell for 15 years, slowly going insane, wanting to tell my story and hoping that one day God would forgive me for the crimes that I've committed. But I had to tell my story before I descended into complete madness. I'm going to kill myself now, but I just want the world to know one thing before I do. Never sell your soul, because you will never get it back.